Doubt throws NBS 4.1% Nigeria's unemployment rate. Welcome to Business Daily. I am Yusuf Akogu. Let's take the business top stories. Glad to have you back. Now let's give you highlights of the stock market as it went down yesterday on the floor of the Nigerian stock market. The market closed positive yesterday, 0.09%. The all share index there way above 66,151.38 basis point. It's a huge number there. The last time we achieved close to this number was in March of 2008 before the global meltdown. The volume of trade 311.116 million there, value at 3.915 billion naira in a deals of 7,193. Of course, the market cap also climbed 36.2 trillion naira. Look at the top gainers on the day. We have the like of Dangote Sugar there performing excellently well. 10% it gained on the day to close at 52 naira 25 kobo. Of course, Transcorp there followed closely there. 10% it gained as well to close at 6 naira 38 kobo as well. Tomsway also closing positive as well. 1.1 naira 87 kobo per share. It ended on the day after gaining 10%. Look at the top losers. Have a computer warehouse group, a software company, losing a huge 10% there to close at 4 naira 50 kobo. John Hurt also on the losing side today, 9.8% it lost to close at 1 naira 38 kobo. Of course, completing the top three losers, have NEM Insurance there, 9.54% it lost to close at 5 naira 12 kobo. We look at the top traded equities. Of course, Access Holdings there, the mother company of Access Bank, 43.7 million volume of shares traded on the day. Transcorp Nigeria second there, 28.5 million volume of shares, followed by Dangote Sugar Refinery, 16 million volume of shares traded. Let's look at the sectorial performance. Because the banking sector is in red today, 0.90%. Of course, there not so good performance there from the banking sector. Of course, the industrial sector is 0.03%. The consumer goods, the highest gainer of the day, of course, bought by the performance of the Dangote Sugar Refinery, 5.86%. The oil and gas sector closed flat, while the insurance sector lost 0.35%. Let's see how the rest of Africa are performing today. Of course, Joburg is the only one in green today, 1.68% it gained. GSE in Ghana is down 0.01%. And of course, Nairobi Stock Exchange down there in Kenya, the Eastern Africa, is also down 0.45%. These are the performance of the market across the continent. Currently, the trading is on across various markets. And of course, as usual, we'll give you update right here on Business Daily. But for now, we're going to take a very quick break. When we return, we'll go into our discussion. Glad to have you back. It's still Business Daily right here on Trust Television. Now we're going into our discussion. President Bola TINUBU said Nigeria cannot continue to service debt with 90% of its revenue. What measures is the government putting in place to ensure that this is controlled? I have joining me right here in the studio, Ahmed Buhari is the CEO of Skylar Incorporated. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And virtually, Mr. Steve Nwachukwu is an economist. He joined me via Zoom from here in Abuja. Good morning, Mr. Steve.
Good morning. Thanks for having me once again.
Yes, let me start from you, Mr. Steve. Our debt to GDP ratio currently stands at about 37.1%, and the government target is about 40%. So, do you think we still have capacity to borrow more?
Well, depending who is analyzing the data, the question will rather be, why do you need to hit the debt market again when you already have raising the alarm that your revenue to debt service is close to 95, 98%? Why should you need to go to the debt market? Even if you have a debt to GDP ratio less than 50% or less than 40%, why should you still need to go to the market to raise this very debt to the level that you need to now borrow from Mr. A to pay Mr. B? So I don't think it's advisable at this point to be looking at the debt market. Rather, government should be looking at other innovative ways to raise funds to actually finance their budget. Yes, the government has to tackle this very issue of debt or deficit in the fiscal budget. Yes, I know government is thinking, how do I raise close to 22 or 23 trillion naira to finance 2023 and 2024 fiscal year budget? Government has to look inwards. There are other models, there are other things you can do that can be adjustable to actually raise funds. Recently, the Ministry of Finance hinted that we have more than 22 moribund or 19 to 20 moribund national assets that can be put to the market, the capital market, so that government can also leverage on that to raise close to about $13 billion. Currently, NNPC is worth more than 25 trillion. If government can look inwards and see how they can raise funds by privatizing the NNPC, government will also raise close to about 12 trillion naira alone from NNPC. So these are methods, or these are what is possibly expected from those in government, the VILA, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Budget and Planning, to be looking inwards. Equity financing. Let's move away from instruments of the IOU instruments to look inwards and look at other debts to debt servicing, debt non-interest bearing notes or non-interest bearing debts, so that government will reduce this burden of 90 to 98% of debt servicing. So I think government should look away from hitting the debt market again, or hitting the market to borrow again using the instrument of IOU. They should rather leverage on the existing assets of federal government to raise this very capital that is needed to fund the fiscal budget. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Steve, let me come back to the studio here. You've listened to Mr. Steve.
Yes.
And also the president has been talking tough. It seems as he means business with all the reforms that he's carrying out.
Right. Yeah. Well, like I keep saying, to start with, I'm not an expert with all the finances and the economy and all of that. But then, with my local intelligence on the streets that I live in, I do understand and I do see clearly that prices of things have increased. And one of the reasons why our side-by-side comparison with the dollar is not looking good is because we are owing, because we are borrowing. The more you borrow, the more you are weaker. It's just like you in your home. The more you go out to say, borrow me this, borrow me that, your value reduces.
Yes.
It's just natural. So I am saying that for politicians, the area where I reside, before we go out to go and borrow, like Mr. Steve was just alerting and warning, why don't we ask ourselves, do we have the capacity to even pay this in the first place? And how long would it take us to pay? And when we fall short, who would we hold accountable? at different instances where we have failed short in the last couple of years when it comes to financing this debt that we have gone to happily borrow, and what are the intricacies embedded in those agreements that we just quickly just embrace and say, oh, we have borrowed this money and then we're going to do this. And then two things are happening here. Number one, we do not see the projects that they want to execute with those debts, with those monies that borrowed executed, number one. Number two, we do not have a clear plan on how we want to repay this debt that we have borrowed. And when you put all of these things together, for someone like me, who I would like to call in the lower cadre of the younger people, we're really worried what our future is going to hold. And I like the fact that Mr. Steve has highlighted the fact that we can look inward, look at other areas in our economy that we can say, you know what, let us tighten up, let us put proper data management system in place, let us put accountability, transparency, efficiency, so that we can actually deliver good governance to the Nigerian people, rather than say, oh, we're stuck and then we're going to hit the international market and see how much money we can borrow again and further deplete our relevance in the Committee of Nations.
Let me still stay with you, Mr. Buhari. You concerned about the lack of transparency in government spending.
Absolutely.
Actually, because if you look at some of this borrowing that the government has taken so far, the latest one being the World Bank $800 million borrowing that was actually given to us with condition.
Right.
That it must be transferred to as cash to poor citizens. Do you think some of this condition should be in a way cut out so that whatever we borrow, we should actually use it since we're actually paying back?
I can assure you, the guys who were on that table when those conditions were given, they were just laughing in their bellies because this is a good chance for them to defraud the system once again. I'll give you an example. You've given money to governors. I'm not saying the governors are fraudulent, but you've given money to governors, and governors have decided to put certain amount of money in envelopes to share to people on the queue. How sure is the governor that those monies were not reduced? It's 10,000. Are you sure it's still 10,000 at the point of handing over to those poor people? What stops us at a time like this to partner with the financial inclusion companies, the financial inclusion industry, to say, for every single person that is going to benefit from this scheme, you would have to have an account. We've got BVNs. Let the government be proud to say, we have rolled out all the BVNs of the beneficiaries. Go and verify and see if they didn't get the money that we said we sent to them. Why are we doing things? Why are we giving money to hand in 2023? We have fintech companies that can easily give you a good spread, especially in the hinterlands where we know commercial banks do not have a good penetration. We have people already there who can easily help us successfully ensure that this money reaches these people. And I know what politicians say, oh, we can't reach there, there's no network. But hey, in the last election that I contested in, every single community, no matter how remote it was, no matter how many rivers I had to cross to get to those communities, I saw posters of political parties already existing, and voting did take place there. In that sense, it means that those places, you can actually activate those people to say, go and register your account number. That is the only way you can receive this money. I have people under me that I give stipends monthly. And now with the fuel subsidy removal, it's tougher for me to do these things. If government is saying, I want to take care of those people, I'm excited. But I want to be sure that they will receive that money. I want to be part of the process that ensures that they are living a better life, even though I'm not able to meet up with my obligations that I had bestowed upon myself before now. These things have got to be clear. If there's no transparency, if there's no accountability, we cannot have good governance. And the only thing that can help this work properly for Nigeria is data management systems.
Indeed, data is very, very important. Mr. Steve, if you're there, let's look at the 2023 budget. The budget deficit is about 8.8 trillion naira. That is $11.81 billion that we need to borrow as part of budget deficit for 2023. Let's see, given the current reforms that the government is undertaking, and the subsidy removal, the exchange rate unification, and so many other things that has been done, the president did told Nigerians the last time he spoke to Nigerians that the government has saved about 1 trillion naira from subsidy removal alone. Do you think we should also borrow this money again to cover the budget deficit?
Oh, thank you. Of course. Beyond borrowing, we should, like I said earlier, we have to have a self-assessment. A self-assessment in the sense that it shouldn't be business as usual. Because the challenge we have in our fiscal appropriation is not just the implementation of the budget or the size of the budget or the size of the deficits is actually most of the corrupt practices that undergoes those process of budgeting and appropriation itself. Last year, we witnessed when former President Buhari raised the alarm that over 400 projects were duplicated in the budget. So these are where the real challenge is. We have problem with invoicing, we have problem with procurement, we have issues with transparency in implementation of the budget. So we have over invoicing in our budget. So these are the areas government should actually look at and see how they can be more efficient. It is not all about deficit. It's about making good use of the mega resources you have. We can have a budget of 10 trillion and it's good enough to be implemented. If you take away corrupt practices, if you take away over invoicing, procurement lapses, and all the rest of them that took away trillions and billions of dollars from the budget value itself. So these are the area government should focus on, because it's not about looking at 22 trillion size of budget or 23 trillion size of budget. It's actually looking at the efficiency in implementation and efficiency in applying those mega resources available, not hitting the debt market to raise the money. It's a question of efficiency, like I talked about, the duplications of some line items in the budget. These are where the real frauds are going on, and these are where the government should focus on and make sure that it's a level of value attached to every single project. One government that I would really demand some kind of query or sort of forensic auditing is this last government of President Muhammadu Buhari. This government borrowed a lot, and we cannot find any of these very projects physically. You cannot tell me that this government borrowed more than $40 billion or thereabouts. And at the end of the day, we still have the east-west road not fixed. At the end of the day, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is still under construction. Enugu, Port Harcourt Road, Abuja, Kanu, Kaduna roads. And these are projects that just 1 trillion naira alone can solve this project. So what are we talking about? So the idea of hitting the debt market should totally be taken away. And let's look at auditing ourselves, having a self-assessment and know truly what size of budget is applicable to Nigeria. Not hitting the figure just like Buhari was consistent from somewhere around when he took over government's budget size was around 6 trillion. He moved it to 8, from 8 to 10, 10 to 13, 13 to 17, 17 to 21, now 22 trillion. Just hitting the debt market, because when you raise your it raises your deficit, and then you go to the market to look for money to fund it. So the question should be, is our economy or the project you have for us with 7 trillion budget be good enough if you take away corrupt practices and over invoicing? These are the areas government should be looking at. Efficiency in financing, efficiency in implementation of the budget, not actually the size of the budget. Just like you talked about, we have about 8 trillion deficit in this very 2023 budget, and have in mind we have already done more than 6, 7, 8 months of the year. And I know for sure the current president have not touched the 2023 budget. If you remember, when he wrote to the National Assembly, he actually went for the supplementary of 2023 budget. He never touched the budget of 2023. So I believe now that he has ministers, they'll be looking towards implementing the 2023. So whatever is to be borrowed cannot be in the region of 2 or 3 trillion, if actually he has to, because one, he has saved a lot. We understand that he has saved close to about 3 trillion. If by the end of the year, you will be saving close to 3 to 4 trillion from the oil subsidy, and non-implementation of the 2023 capital component of that budget, because I know nothing has been done by this very government, even the past government, in the last 6 months in regards to capital projects. So the recurrence, I know for sure, is basic. They have to carry it out. So government should not be looking at the debts instrument. Let's
Mr.
look
Steve,
at
Mr. Steve,
earlier and see how we can
staying with
assist
you.
ourselves with what we have.
Mr. Steve, still staying with you. Let's look at the cabinet now. We have an expanded cabinet. This is the highest, that we have had so far since 1999. About 48 ministers. Of these ministers will come with their aides and some of the special advisors that they will need to help them execute their policies and programs. Don't you think this will also impact on government overhead?
Exactly. This is where we are talking about the efficiency in spending, because you cannot continue to enlarge your government. You see, our recurrent expenditure, like I said, the Buhari administration is one of the worst administration we had. Our what do you call it? Recurrent expenditure continue to maintain a whopping size more than 68%. After we have moved from somewhere around 6 trillion of our budget size in 2016 and 2015 to 22 trillion, meaning that the workforce, the number of aides and the number of money you spent for recurrent, and have in mind that recurrent expenditure is what is used to service the capital. Like those that work in the Ministry of Works, the minister and those supervisors are the recurrent. These are the people that will supervise those job works done by Ministry of Works. If you go to Ministry of Housing, the same thing. So why is this very size of recurrent continues to grow in the same proportion of the budget growing? Have our civil servants doubled? No. Have the number of parastatals been increased? No. Why do we still have more than 65% of our recurrent? If you have moved your budget from somewhere around 6 trillion, 7 trillion to 20, you expected the capital component of your budget to at least measure up to 50%. But the capital component of our budget still remain within 25 to 30% maximum, while recurrent continue to maintain 65, 68 to 70% of our national budget. That is a sign of corruption, that we are spending so much in servicing the recurrent, while the capital component of the budget, we should take care of the infrastructures that we need. We should take care of these roads I talked about, the TINUBU, Port Harcourt, the name it, all the infrastructures we are talking. We are currently producing less than 5,000 megawatts. These are the capital components that should up our production to somewhere around 20,000 or distributed maybe 10,000. So these are the areas we are looking at. Government should cut down the size of those people in governance, both the SAs and PAs, the ministers, whatever government has to do around this corner to reduce this recurrence and overloaded public servants. That will help
what
us.
he has done so far with, in terms of the visit to ONGA, United Nations General Assembly, he had said that those who have no business going there should not bother traveling to the United States. But let's look at the cost of governance now. He has spoke about it. The cabinet is very large. What do you think? How do you think this will impact on the revenue of the government?
Well, he's going to agree with me that the Buhari's cabinet was smaller.
Certainly.
Than the number of people we have now as ministers, who are definitely going to have a stretch of aids and all of that to support their activities. It still boils down to accountability. So if you have this size of people, if you put it together, how much they're supposed to receive in earnings, in allowances,
Nesta codes,
it's
so many other things.
Still nothing. It's still nothing in reality. So when people scream and say, can you imagine they have so many, if you're going to put them on salaries, it's just like the civil service. Ideally, if you look at the structure of the amount of money they're supposed to be paid, like, monthly and all of that, it's nothing that is supposed to raise any alarm. But again, the reason why we're going through the same problems we're going through is because that structure is not transparent for us to audit. There should be an audit system that lets Nigerians know exactly how much is being spent in these spaces, why it is being spent, and for us, we'll be like, oh, they're supposed to even do more because they have more job they're doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, you mean they only spend 10,000 naira for transportation? It can't work. Let them give them more. But we can't even see it. And that is why there's all of these problems with regards to accountability, transparency, and efficiency. So I heard what the last speaker said, but ideally, with regards to the size of the cabinet, I think if the size of the cabinet is going to give us efficiency, why not? Let us have that size of cabinet. However, the money that is going to be used to run that what do you call it, the service, all of that structure has to be clearly defined so that we know that nobody is being shortchanged, especially
so we know who is
getting what and why it's getting that.
Absolutely. Yes. I must thank you, Ahmed Buhari, Chief Executive Officer, Skylar Incorporated. I must thank you for your time on Business Daily. And of course, Steve Nwachuku, an economist, I must thank you for sharing your money with us.
Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Then with that is a wrap on the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. I am Yusuf Akubu.